Hello, and welcome back to Onward Shift Podcast. Today we have a really interesting guest with us, Will Hamilton, and he'll be to us about the journey from boy to a man and all the things that go wrong and the things that can go absolutely right. Hi, Will. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well, Vishal. Thank you. And uh, I suppose as a quick intro, I'm in the third age of life. I've been working in IT for 30 odd years and then slid into counselling and therapy. And now I work exclusively in that area. And I've been working in private practice since 2011. 19 was this particular bit. 2011 was when I qualified. And yeah, I work online with clients across the country. Yeah.
Well, and do you predominantly work with men, or is your client base sort of a bit of
That's
everyone?
an interesting question because about 20% of the country's therapists are men. Okay, so we're definitely in the minority, and
Yeah.
that's probably for traditional reasons. Women are generally seen as more nurturing, more caring. It's more of a mothering sort of approach. So I guess there's a greater demand for that. But sometimes clients specifically want to talk to a man, and as far as I can make out, it's pretty evenly split. Okay, so guys want to talk to me, but women want to talk to me as well because presumably I match up with something in their past that was beneficial. You know, they had a
That's really
brother
interesting.
or an uncle or whatever that was a good person to talk to. There is also another group, the blokes. Okay, sometimes blokes just want to talk to blokes, so
Yeah.
they want to be blokey about it. So yeah, I think I get a lot of bloke work.
Fair play. It's really interesting you say that because with Onward Shift, when I was looking for coaches and counselors, we got over 100 applicants come through. And if I'm perfectly honest, I'd say over 90% were women who
Mm.
were coming through. So I do believe there is a huge gap in the market for men to come in because men do need support from men. It's not always the case.
No,
I've personally seen coaches and counselors for the last 6 years, and they've all been women. And that's been absolutely fantastic because ultimately they're just professionals in their industry. But I do think there is a space where sometimes a man just needs to speak to a man. And I think there's clubs out there as well, like the Andy's Club,
yes,
things like that, which is great. But yeah, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think there should be more coaches and counselors who are coming through that
mm.
are men. That would be nice to see, actually.
Yeah, it would make a difference, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. Especially with especially in the construction industry where it's a male-dominated industry, and the mental health is in an absolute crisis at the moment. With the suicide rates being nearly 4 times higher than the national average, and 700 suicides just last year, and 7,000 in the last decade. We just need more support in the
Yeah.
industry. But I'd love to understand the topic of boy to a man's journey, and I'd love to deep dive into this and really understand that journey because I think it's interesting. Being a guy, my journey will be different to your journey, and your journey will be different to someone else's, but we all go through a similar one. So, I'd love to hand it over to you and
Okay.
pick your
Yeah, and
brains today.
the idea behind this is, there are no roadmaps. There's no fixed route through all of this, and we go through a lot of very similar experiences. But then there's also the timing thing. I was um, growing up in the 70s and 80s, the 1970s and 80s. So there was, things were drastically different in all sorts of ways environmentally around that time. So it was a quite a different world from now. And in 10 years' time, it'll be different again. So we can't just assume that everyone's going to experience what we experienced. But from the guys I've been talking to, there are themes and patterns that keep on coming up that I think are worth flagging for everyone else. Okay, so teenage years, a period of huge disruption, all sorts of challenges just getting through that period because we're going through physical and mental changes. And then we arrive in our 20s, and that's great, because all of a sudden you've got um, an adult's capacity to do stuff, freedom, and what it seems like looking back, endless energy and the ability to bounce back. So you can do stuff that a couple of decades later is way too difficult to manage on the physical side. So you've got this great period, where you go out into the world and you're ready for anything. And then all this new stuff starts arriving. You end up with, maybe doing a lot more traveling. You're meeting a lot more people. You're at work, which is a great sensation. You're earning your own money and doing your own thing. You're meeting, potential partners, and you're out socializing. It's a really exciting time. But it comes with also this question of, what am I supposed to be doing? How am I supposed to be navigating through this particular period of time? And we have this shorthand that we use. We talk about people in their 20s or people in their 30s and their 40s. And we use it in a way that, like, we expect everyone to know what we mean. But to be fair, my 20s were completely different from your 20s because we were in different parts of the country at different times. It's not the same thing. However, there are milestones that come through in that, let's say, that first decade that are universal. So maybe we start to settle down with our first serious partner. Maybe we move in together. And there's another challenge, learning to live with someone else closely,
Yeah.
And then we carry on with that, and maybe we move towards, maybe we're talking about getting married, getting attached, making some sort of formal commitment. And that can be challenging for guys specifically because it's not necessarily something that guys think about when they're young. Having a family and being married is kind of a background thought. Yeah, it's bound to happen, but I'm not going to spend any time imagining all the detail. So when this stuff starts coming up, guys can be challenged because they just haven't had any reason to prepare for it, and it's a totally new idea. That can move on, because you can be, depending on the sort of environment you're in, you might be finding yourself at 23, 24 with these thoughts about getting married and settling down with a partner. And then there's the question of, where are we going to live? Are we going to get our own flat? Are we going to get a mortgage? Oh, I mean, the pressures that suddenly appear out of nowhere because you're talking about finance, committing to someone for a lifetime, and maybe starting a family. There's no preparation for guys for having that sort of stuff. And they're sometimes coming and talking to me about it because it's too tricky. It's not a comfortable guy-to-guy conversation. Yeah, you don't go into work talking to your mates and say, "Yeah, I'm really not certain about this whole emotional connection with my partner." And by the way, did you know she's really keen on kids? And it just doesn't happen because guys are much better with the larking around, boisterous conversations, and the emotional stuff we don't get any practice with. So much so, that we can get really angry with our mates about stuff. Really, I mean, steaming angry, and then it's dealt with and it's over and everything's back to normal. We carry on. But breaking down in tears in front of your mates, no, we are not going to do that. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't recommend it as a standard practice, but it's what I'm trying to emphasize here is how our limited sort of training, and maybe genetics as well, maybe it is just a bloke thing, but we're not practiced in exploring this sort of stuff with other blokes. And so we're left having to find this stuff out for ourselves, come up with our own best plan,
Do you find, like, when we look back at the teenage years, which is a crucial part of that becoming, that transition, I guess, from boy to teenager, I guess, to man, I'm starting to see a lot of negative influence from authoritative voices. I'll do that because they're not very authoritative, they're just loud. What's your thoughts on things like, I guess, the whole Andrew Tate type of situation? I think your facial expression says a lot, because he sadly has had a huge impact and he's got a huge following from young men who are very easily influenced by fast cars, beautiful women, money, authority, entrepreneurship. They're influenced by all of these things. But Andrew Tate, in my opinion, kind of makes everything seem accessible and easy, but it's really not. For a normal guy like myself or like yourself, this stuff is just not normal.
No.
It's not what most of us will come across in our lifetime or even from our parents' lifetime.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it's a bit of a misselling of the message. Yeah, the pitch here is that you can have whatever you want. You can have the glamorous lifestyle, and it's simple. And that's one of my big pitches to my clients is we're really complicated creatures. We live in a really complicated world. So anyone who offers you a simple solution should be treated with suspicion. Life is not simple.
I like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so true. So
And
true.
And what I push actually for the young guys is this idea of working out for yourself your own sense of values. They're already there, okay? They're embedded. It's just that they aren't normally voiced or sort of expressed. But we all have values, things that we say are important, and they can range from physical ability, pushing yourself physically, to being supportive or being kind, or it can be very committed to work, really focusing in on getting things done. These are all good values. But remember the deal about simple. You're not going to live by one value. You're going to have a range of them. Yeah, narrative therapy. Okay, narrative therapy was created in Australia in the 80s and has this idea that we are storytellers and we live our stories. And their presentation is that we're living more than one storyline at any time. We're right now, we're in our social sort of networking storyline. We're out there with our mates and doing our stuff, and that's good. But we've also got a work storyline, what we want to be doing with work, how we see progression. And then we've got a family of origin storyline because we're still seeing our folks at home and our brothers and sisters and all that sort of stuff. And maybe there's also a partnership storyline where we're spending time with our partner. These all need their time in the spotlight. You can't narrow your life down to a single story without paying a price somewhere along the line. Yeah. And if things don't feel right, then my push would be maybe there's a part of your stories that isn't getting attention that needs to. It's not that everything needs to change. You're just missing out on one particular track. But this idea that we can have it all and we can have all this glamour and glossy lifestyle, I don't think it's very useful, and I'm kind of keen on useful stuff. It doesn't feel, well, from my own personal experience, there was no way I was going to have the sports cars and the speedboats and the fancy accommodation and the travel across the world. Yeah, I wasn't earning enough money, and back in my day, remember, there wasn't social media anyway, but it was never going to be achievable, but no one expected me to get there either. And I think that might be part of this. The disadvantage of this general message is that everyone's hearing it and feeling judged by it. And one of the major pictures about therapy and counselling is that's a space where you don't get judged. Being judged is a really harsh way of living, and it can force us into really difficult spaces.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And you're right. I do think we are judged on what cars we drive, what house we live in, what clothes we wear. And it's quite a sad place to be. But I think there's like a line, isn't there, where we don't want to tell these young men, don't be ambitious. No. Because you have to be ambitious. You have to fight for your dreams and you have to work really, really, really hard to achieve these dreams. But also don't set unrealistic expectations of in the first year you're going to have a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, and it doesn't happen. Life it happens to a very, 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 very small minority of lucky people who might have got lucky on a crypto coin or whatever.
Yeah.
But the realism of this is it doesn't happen to a majority of us. It happens to a very small few, and those small few shouldn't really be idolized. It's those who wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they get ready and they go to work and they come home at 6 o'clock in the evening and they look after their kids. They make sure their house is clean. They make sure the finances are in order. They make sure that they're really present with their family and they're really present with their friends. And they understand hard work is important, but they set real expectations.
Yeah. And yes, you're right. I wouldn't want to put anyone off being ambitious and working hard, because that ties in with your values, yeah, where we started, this idea of having your values and working towards it. But it's not about getting it all in 24 hours. It's about having the longer view of, where am I going? What am I going to be doing all this stuff for? And there's a trick with numbers that I'm bothered by. Okay, talking about the extreme wealth that people can acquire. So if you earned £100,000 a year and never spent any of it, that's a good salary in my head. £100,000 a
That's
year.
an incredible salary. Wow.
In 10 years, you'd be a millionaire if you never spent it. Brilliant. To be a billionaire, you have to do that for 10,000 years. There's a slight slip on the numbers there, but we'll let the people spot that one. But there's difference in that amount of money is so dramatic because we don't deal with billions any other time. It's shocking in terms of what inequality there is in the world, but I don't think we should be striving to get to the top of that particular pile. I don't think it's necessarily comfortable or useful, and it's perhaps better to be working towards your own targets and your own part of the world. This is what I want to achieve. This is how I want my future to look. Because the other side of it is, because there are no roadmaps for this sort of progression as a man, as a bloke through the world, the environment around us is going to change. The universe is going to throw stuff at us that we weren't expecting. So thinking that we can make up a plan and then just follow it step by step and we'll get there isn't realistic. The world is going to throw stuff at us that will knock us off course every now and then. Not permanently necessarily, but we have to be realistic about this is going to be a journey. It's going to be hard work, very hard work at times, but there's also going to be highlights. There's going to be a lot of fun. It's a balance, and maybe that's the thing that is missing in most of the sort of presentations for young men these days. Is actually what you want to have is a balanced life. You want some excitement, but you also need some downtime. You want time with your friends. Maybe you need time on your own. You want to have your family around you. Other times, they're maybe the last people you need directly in your space, but that's okay. It's keeping this stuff in balance that allows you to actually, enjoy your life and still work towards a longer target, maybe.
The interesting thing about balance, and I'm going to be a bit controversial here by saying this,
go for it,
is I just don't believe in it all the time. I think we go through phases of life and it's just so hard to balance everything, because at the age of 18, I didn't really care about my career. I cared a little bit, but I cared about going out. That was my priority. So the balance was off. And then you get to mid-20s and you're kind of like, I can't keep partying. I need to think about the future. So then the balance changes again. So you focus a lot more on finding that partner, figuring out, is it house, mortgage, rent? What am I going to do? And, do I need to buy a car now? And, where do I want my career to go? So the balance shifts again. And then I'm now in my phase, so I can't talk further than that. But the balance has shifted again because I'm like, oh my God, I need to get married. I'm like, I need to have kids. Oh my God, the pressure is on. And it's like, again, the balance has shifted because really and truly, I want to focus 110% in my career, but I'm no longer just focusing on myself. I'm focusing on my partner, what she wants, how far she wants to make things happen. And all of a sudden, I think a balance is such a hard one. It's like an AC or sine wave. It's like you just can't get it right. Maybe other guys can, but I physically cannot get balance right. I just notoriously good at failing at that, for sure.
Well, okay, no, and I take your point, yes, and the idea that we can keep it balanced is too hard, especially when you suddenly discover there's another storyline that suddenly needs to be focused on, like marriage and the event or just the process or house change and all that sort of stuff. Yes, it is. Maybe it's impossible to have everything balanced at once, but the argument would still be there that it's okay to focus on the wedding. It's okay to focus on getting the mortgage. because that's what you need to organise now. But it's not the case that you can keep your focus on that indefinitely. That's not practical because other parts of your life need their turn in the spotlight. So it's
yes,
an ongoing, maybe it's an ongoing job, yeah? And it's a case of over let's say, this 12-month period, we're going to be focusing on mortgage, marriage, and moving in. But, the 12 months after that, those three will all be history. And we'll be looking at babies and work and wherever that's going to take us. So I guess it's keeping the options open so you can be flexible.
That's interesting.
Yeah, your focus you can be focused, but you have to recognize you're not always going to be focused on the same thing forever.
That's so true. I completely agree with that. And I think it was nice that you said, the spotlight has to be on different things at different times. You have to give that opportunity to happen. I really like that analogy. I think when you said spotlight, I instantly thought, yes, that makes sense. I really like that one.
Cool.
But do you find that social media has had a huge impact on the way we behave now in terms of, everything is so accessible. You see people on social media who you've never met in your life, you're never going to meet in your life, but because they're always on the camera, they're talking, which makes it feel like they're talking to you, and they're like, oh, we're getting married and we're having children. Do you feel like there's like a social pressure coming from social media to young men?
Yeah, and it's magnifying what would normally be happening. So imagine if there were no social media, as back in the day. You take your cues from the social group around you. So if your guys are all settling down with a partner and then they're all talking about marriage or talking about buying a house or whatever, that focus of your social group, you want to be in that space, even if you don't quite fit in with all of their thoughts, it sets a scene. The problem about social media is because it's worldwide and all pervasive, the impact is much higher because it's not just your mates who are getting a flat and getting married. It's apparently everyone of your age across the entire bloody planet. That's how it looks.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does.
Yeah. And it does create a pressure. For guys, I've found that it also creates a lot of questions because as far as I can make out, okay, there are the whole thing about marriage and kids and family. Guys don't think about it until they have to. It's not something they're sort of planning from 18 years onwards or anything. It's kind of I'm sure we'll do it, but no one really thinks about it sort of thing. And then it arrives on the doorstep in whatever way it does, some really special person turns up or some other issue triggers it all. And then it's a kind of a rushed thinking sort of phase when how's this? What am I going to do with all this stuff? How do I handle this new way of being that might involve being in a partnership and, being responsible for a child?
Absolutely.
And it's a shock. That's the impact. That's how it feels to me when I'm talking to these guys. It's arrived as a shock, and they're not sure. Some of the guys are not sure they even want it because it's arrived so quickly and they haven't had a chance to think about it. Other guys are kind of okay with it, but they've never really discussed it with anyone, so that's why they're talking to me about it. And a very small group, in terms of people talking to me, are really keen on the idea. They've always wanted to be a dad. They've always wanted to do that sort of thing, but it's certainly not the majority as far as I can make out.
Well,
and that doesn't get addressed in social media.
No, it doesn't. And I've got to say, I'm in between all of that. And I think loads of guys are in between all of that. I've come from a single parent upbringing. So my dad passed away when I was 2 or 3. I'm not actually sure.
Okay.
So I've always dreamt of being a dad. I'm like, this is 100% what I want to do. I want to hold a little baby and I want to make sure that I've created a lifestyle where I can drop them to school, pick them up. That's like my dream to do that. Forget about the money and the car and the house and all that. My dream is to be a present dad because that's something I've never had. But I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. Terrified. One, what if I mess it up? What if I completely mess up this fatherhood thing? I've got this dream of what I want it to be. What if I mess it up? Two, can I financially even think about it right now? So it's like, am I in a headspace where I'm like, money wise, can I afford it? Babies are expensive. They're
Yeah.
not like, even nappies. A pack of nappies cost like £9 or whatever now.
Yeah.
And you go down the Sainsbury's aisle and you're like, oh my God, this is expensive. Like, can I
Yeah.
afford that? I don't live a lavish lifestyle right now. And I think for guys, there's a lot of us in that in between phase of we want this, but our logical mind kicks in and is like, can we afford it? Where are we going to put the baby's cot?
Yes.
A pram now costs a couple of £100. Then the maintenance of, everything else that goes with it. Maintenance meaning like the nappies, the
Just the
the
running
time,
cost.
and then the lack of sleep. If you're an entrepreneur or if you're running your own business, it's like you don't sleep much anyway, and then you have to think about all of those things, and it's just like your mind just goes from happy thought to oh my God, I'm petrified, forget this, I'm going to put this at the back of my brain again because I'm too scared to actually face reality with this. And guys, you're right, we don't have nobody to speak to about this. I can't pick up my phone and go to my mate, I'm scared to have kids. He'll
Yeah.
laugh me out the door. He'll be like, "Fish, man up." I don't agree with man up, but yeah, all right. It's it's a tricky spot.
It is, and it is also a fear that has been presented to me before. How do I know I'm going to be a good dad? And it is a challenge. But from all of the clients I've had who have come to me with stuff from their childhoods that has left them with scars, as far as I can see, it's simple to say, it's not simple to do. But if a child can experience unconditional love, they can get by with almost anything else. Yeah. But
Well,
they have to be loved unconditionally, which means basically they have to be loved for existing. They don't have to achieve at school. They don't have to achieve at work. They don't have to be a sports person. They don't have to do anything. They just have to exist, and they're loved for that. They will have the best basis for moving forward.
wow, that's
Easy,
deep. Well,
easy
that's
to
deep.
say. Yeah.
That's deep. Ooh, I don't know why, but that hit home for some reason. I'm like, oh, that kind of, I felt that.
Okay. Well, the other catch is that there is a belief that maybe it can never be proved, but there is a belief that actually we're wired to know what good parenting is.
Oh wow.
Okay, so kids actually come into the world and already have a pattern of what good fathering and good mothering should be, which is great, I guess. But there is this terrible situation where imagine a child is in a non-loving, a dangerous household, and they're
Hmm.
wired to know what good parenting is. They know they're being treated badly. That
Hmm.
feels horrible to me, but hopefully that's I can't fix that particular one. But yeah, I believe we are wired to know what good parenting is, and if it can just be refined down to unconditional love, yeah, maybe that's a good starting point.
That's really interesting. I guess maybe I don't know. I've never done any research on this. So I haven't got a clue. But maybe it's not that. It's not what we know is good parenting and bad parenting. It's maybe we come into the world knowing what love and not being loved is.
Yeah,
Just thinking about what you said before and merging them together.
yeah, no,
I'm not
that's really
sure.
neat actually. Yeah, because
That's
we're not trained
yeah,
to love, we know how to love. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
That's just food for thought.
Yeah, no, it's a good one. It's a good one. I'm going to use that one. Thank you. Yeah.
And also, it's like I think there's another thing about from social media to real life, and that's the pressures. And there's a pressure that me and you spoke about behind the scenes, and I'll put it to light now, and that is I do believe women get a lot of pressure from external sources, like going out and saying, "Oh, have you got kids?"
Mm.
or "Why are you not having kids?" or "Why are you not married?" or and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah.
But and I don't want to disregard that genuinely happens, and it's a hard thing for it to happen to constantly be asked that. But I feel there's a huge pressure from women to men as well, like partners saying, "Well, I want to have kids, I want to get married," and
Mm.
then guys are in their head thinking again, going down the same thought process of, "I don't have the money, I don't know what I want, I don't know if I want to, I don't know where to live, I don't know if this is the right choice," and then guys also spiral. They go, "Oh well, what about when we have kids? Is this school going to be okay? Is the
Mm.
secondary school going to be okay?" We're thinking like 50 years in advance, and we've completely forgotten about the first step because we're already thinking of retirement by this stage.
Yeah. How can I get to this point? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, yeah, that story of women getting to a certain age and then feeling under pressure, time pressure to sort of have a family. They've also potentially had longer to think about it in terms of it's a more expected thing, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe it's a more common topic in female circles. Not surprisingly, I guess, I haven't had any female clients coming to me with questions about motherhood. That would kind of make sense. So it's not an area that I can tap into, but I have had lots of guys come to me saying, my partner is now really keen on having a family and getting married, and it's expressed as time pressure. There's a limited amount of time that a woman can produce a child without additional risks, and I get all that.
Absolutely.
And it's a real problem in that sense, because the guys are not prepared. They haven't thought about it, and because it's presented as a time pressure, it's urgent, which means that you're not in a position to take time thinking over it. But to be fair, it's not today or tomorrow. It's still reasonably short term, but it's not that sort of timescale. I don't know what the answer is, because if you haven't been thinking about it, it's going to come as a shock. And again, there's no framework, and there are all the fears. Yeah, the ones that you mentioned of the costs, the running costs, and the getting it wrong. So it's not a simple thing for a guy to get sorted in his head in a short space of time. So I don't know how we could have guys having that sort of conversation. I don't know how you'd introduce it down the pub.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a weird one because men just don't communicate that way. No. We just don't. And I think something you said earlier is we're great at making jokes. We're great at laughing things off and, just kind of go, throw that aside. Let's have another drink. Men don't cry. Men don't talk about their vulnerabilities. We don't create spaces for that. And I think another thing that I can only talk from personal experience and the very small handful of friends that I have who are guys, and we're all in the same boat. Like we occasionally, very, very, very occasionally have these deep conversations, and it kind of goes, honestly, I don't know how I'm affording food right now. It's so bloody expensive. Like this Nando's or this whatever we're eating, back in the day, this only used to cost like £12.50. Now it's like £25 plus a bottomless Coke or whatever. And you think to yourself, God, like it's getting proper expensive. Like, look at mortgage rates. Look at just buying a house. Look at deposits. Look at even buying a car now. A car you could have bought 10 years ago for a couple of grand. It's going up. Like these cars. When we bought a car recently, nothing flashy. I think it's a 2011 plate Citroen. Right, it's not even a nice colour.
Okay.
and it cost over £4,000. It's not even new, Les. And you think to yourself, I think it was £4,600, or something like that. Anyway,
yeah,
that's a lot of money for an old car. I remember my first car when I was 18. I got a Golf, and it was £2,500, and it was a brilliant little car. And you think to yourself, like, financially, it's so hard. So then to add on the pressures of marriage, children, house. Oof. Well, it stresses me out.
Yeah.
It stresses me out.
Well, it should do as well. The costs of living are dramatic, and the idea of taking on further costs and another mouth to feed and all the rest of it is severe. But there's a presentation, there's an idea that our world is created by both our environment and our behaviours, and we can incorrectly picture ourselves as trapped by both. Okay? But the argument then goes, well, actually, behaviours are like suits of clothes. We can actually change our behaviours. I'm not talking about changing who we are, just changing what we do, how we do it. We can change our behaviours should we have the right motivation, and we can change our environment. But because we're social creatures, changing our environment might mean moving away from the people we know, the support we already have, and the things that make us feel safe. So it's a really difficult idea, but the argument would be there are ways of changing our world that will allow us to do whatever it is we think is our priority. Okay, so again, it's come back to that balance and focus again, isn't it? The spotlight.
The spotlight.
Where do we want to put the attention right now? It does feel very unfair that we can't do all the stuff we want to do with everyone that we want around us, but the economics say that that's not a manageable thing right now. But that's also one of the things that comes out of young guys when I'm talking to them. Let's say we've moved on now. We're in the family world now.
Okay.
We've got married. We've got our kids. Social life takes this right-hand turn, okay, and goes somewhere totally different. We're not going out anymore. We don't even see our mates anymore unless they're also with kids.
So true.
Yeah,
so
we
true.
suddenly become... our world suddenly becomes very kid-focused in terms of, we socialise with other parents. We don't go out nearly as much because it's a lot of hassle. Date night is a nice idea, doesn't necessarily translate into a real thing, because everything is so demanding in the early stages of family life. And I don't know if it's a defensive thing, maybe it's good because it does cut down the costs, or maybe it's bad because we need more socializing. But it's a very noticeable phase that guys bring up for me when they're in that. They're enjoying being a parent, but all of a sudden their social life has dwindled or even disappeared. And
that's such an interesting point.
Yeah, it's not good either. We do need interaction with others. We do need a social life. It's one of those storylines. We do need our social network to still be there to keep everything ticking over on a manageable basis.
They say it takes a village to raise a child.
Yes.
But once you have a child, community is that one thing you absolutely need. So hard to come by because everyone's at, again, different phases of their lives.
Yes.
And there's no right or wrong, and there's no time frame to it. It's just people were there at different times. And honestly, this is very different, but also slightly similar. So me and my partner recently got a puppy. Well, he's not a puppy anymore. He's a teenager now. So he's how old is he? Like 14 months or something like that. And since we got him, well, I'm not joking with you. It's changed our lives. It's completely changed our lives. Maybe we're just overprotective and I don't know. But it's changed our lives. One, I've learned how to have extremely difficult conversations with strangers because if they've got a dog which I don't trust,
yes,
I'm not letting that dog near mine. If it's a reactive dog, I'm not letting it near mine. And he's like, you have to learn how to grow up very quickly. And this is just a puppy. Or, like I've got ADHD and OCD. So I like things to be very particular.
Yeah.
But once the puppy come through the door, that has gone out the window. I'll tell you something. This is not my house no more. It's his house. And I'm a guest in that. But also, like yesterday, I had to stop work because he needed his vaccination. So again, it's not a baby, but it's still a responsibility. So you have to stop work. You have to settle him down, get him ready.
Yeah.
Make sure he's peed. Yeah. Make sure he's got water. Take him to the vets. And then when he's squealing because he don't like needles, you have to calm him down. Give him treats to make sure he gets that positive affirmation or whatever you call it. And then you have to bring him home. You have to give him cuddles because he's feeling a bit down. And then your work starts again because he's finally decided to go to sleep. And you think your whole life changes. And then you add in a social mix to that. Well, if you don't like dogs, then what do?
Yeah.
We can't just leave him at home. He's a part of our family. I completely understand. Sorry, I was waffling there. But it's like, I completely understand about that social dynamic just completely changes.
Yeah. And it's not an optional thing. Whether you want it to or not, it will change. Yeah, that's the twist is, again, this is something that we haven't necessarily planned or requested. It's just been forced on us by the situation we're in. And that can be part of the problem. If we've got time to think this stuff through and come to terms with it and say, yeah, okay, so social life is going to change. Instead of going out every other night, we're going to go out every third weekend. It's rubbish, but, I've got my head around it. But when it just arrives, that can be really hard to process, especially with all of the other new stuff that you're trying to sort of get your head around. So it's the shock. And that's when family of origin storylines can come in, because just having someone around that you trust who's been through it before can be useful. I realise that's not the case for everybody.
It's again, that's such an interesting point. I'm just seeing it from a guy's perspective, and this is just a guy's my perspective. I won't say guys because it's not fair to put every guy in the same boat as me, but it's really good to have help. Like, for example, I could potentially have my mum or my partner's mum come over and support us with the baby, but it's also a very temporary thing because you can't really have my mum and my partner in the same house for too long, because there's always going to be a little authoritative clash there.
Yes.
And maybe that's just my family dynamics, but having my mum here for a month, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. Or having my partner's mum here for a month and I'm walking around in my boxes, it's just not going to work. It'll be really, really disturbing for her. So I just feel like we need that support. But this is why I think, again, that social dynamic is really interesting. And one of my close family members has just had a child, and she said there's actually mums clubs, so they can go and do like activities with other babies, and they can bond and stuff like that with other children and stuff like that, and the mothers can all bond. But I'm yet to come across one for guys, like a dad's club where the dad can take the baby and socialize with other dads. And I don't know. Do they exist? I don't know if they exist. I don't know.
Well, no, there's a challenge to that straight away, because that is not the traditional role, and it's not dads are seen. So there would be very little opportunity. But equally, if there was a guy who was at home looking after the kids, he probably wouldn't feel that comfortable going along to a mum's club and standing out, being the individual. It'd be really tricky environment to be in. So, yes.
It's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking back, okay? So what happened with my son was that basically school, okay? So you take your child to school, and that is where you meet a lot of parents of similar age kids who are obviously going through similar sorts of experiences, and friendships that happened for me. Friendships develop then that have stayed in place because we then go through the same journey together. Yeah. And it works for the guys as well as for dads as well as mums. But it's still very blokey though. Okay. The relationship between the mums is quite different from the relationship between the dads.
I can actually literally imagine a group of guys sitting in a circle just throwing the babies to one another. No, I'm joking. I don't think that's a good idea. I should emphasize it's a very, very bad idea. Do not throw your baby across the room to another dad.
Yeah.
But this is such a typical bloke. This is such a typical bloke conversation now, isn't it?
Yeah.
But this is the thing. But this is also, just because it's a typical bloke conversation doesn't mean it's not educational. And this is the thing. Like, we do need to break that stigma around men talking and men just having a chat with one another, because that will also help with men kind of going, I can be emotional and I can be vulnerable to my partner. So there is a huge, I guess, task ahead of us to change that stigma around men's vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and there's more than one way of getting around it. But one of the things I've also found is that guys can have a much more in-depth conversation when they're doing something.
Yes.
Some sort of task.
For
whatever reason. If we're doing something manual, then actually some other part of our brain kicks in and you can actually have a surprisingly deep conversation. So long as the task is still being done, whatever it is, it unlocks access to important thinking. I don't know why, but it seems pretty common. So maybe it is just a bloke thing again. Which is why apparently guys can work really well.
So apparently, I was listening to a podcast recently. I think it was a Stephen Bartlett one, and he said something similar to that. Because I've always said to my missus, I said, "Look, I really want to have this conversation, but if I'm sat in one place, I can't pay attention. My head just spirals, and everything is taken on so personally. I can't do it. I physically really, really, really struggle. Even, God, we've been together over 5 years now, and I still struggle with it. And we've come to this thing now. If she wants to really talk to me about something, we go for a walk, we go for a drive, or it can be something, but it has to be an activity. which involves me moving, and it's hugely helped. But apparently, this is, again, I don't know if this is factual. This has just come from another podcast which I've listened to,
Okay.
and that's men are better at talking when they're side by side. Apparently,
Yes.
not face to face, but side by side, because of generations and generations of men having to be side by side in battle, finding food, hunting, and all of that. So we find it easier to talk side by side. Very interesting. I don't know if that's factual, but logically, it makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah, and it sounds right. So there's an idea tied up in this about disinhibition. So the idea that we can't have a conversation unless we feel safe enough, yeah. And one of the benefits of online therapy is that for some guys, that distance, although we're talking screen to screen, that distance gives a sense of safety that allows them to talk about stuff that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. And I can see the side by side. You know, no one's staring at me. I'm not being examined or judged. We're walking and we're having a conversation while we walk. We're doing something else. Yeah, I could see how that would work. It would fit in with that idea that I'm not under threat.
That's very interesting. I'm going to have to do some more research on that and see if I can put some articles out there and just research and learn stuff. That's really interesting. So we've spoken about the teenage, the teenage to adult to early 20s stage, and then we spoke about the mid 20s to, I guess mid 30s stage, and then we spoke about the mid 30s till probably 40s stage, and then there's another phase of life that comes, which is the scariest one of all, I think, and that's that phase of I've got the job that I love, I've got the house, I've got the family, I've got everything I've ever dreamt of, or I'm at least I'm closer to it than I was before. What happens? What happens when you get to that age?
So there you are. Let's say you're into your 40s now. Work is going really well. You're senior in whatever role you're at. The family is an established thing. You're all practiced at what you're doing. There are a number of different challenges that can kick in then. So we're imagining that the kids are now in teenage years.
Okay.
And that can bring obvious challenges. There's sort of stuff that jokes are made of, living with teenagers. But it also can be very disruptive for some of the guys that I've been talking to. It can be a period where things go off the rails, and the guys lose the plot's not fair. They stop enjoying where they're at because it's potentially challenging at home. Teenagers will always be challenging as far as I can see. There's not much you can do about that. It's a huge emotional and physical period of change. So it's always going to be difficult. But when the guys go off the rails, they can hark back to how things were better, in the previous decade or whatever. And I have had a number of clients, quite a large number of clients, unfortunately, come to me and they're thinking about separating. They're thinking about divorce and leaving that family unit because it's just too difficult to stay with. And the shock at that particular point is because guys are very rational. We compartmentalize and we put all this stuff into structure. And in our heads, what we're doing is we're separating from our partner. That's all we're doing. It's just that's how we're getting out of this. And then there's this shock when the teenagers take this really badly, really, really badly. Okay, the teenagers come back and basically say, "You're not just divorcing mum, you're actually divorcing us. You're abandoning us." And the guy was expecting to sort of run some second house, if you like, where he would look after the kids occasionally, he would drop in occasionally, he would still be part of the fathering thing, just not part of the partnership. Mm-hmm. And it's happened enough times that I'm bringing it up in this sort of conversation because it shouldn't be a shock when you've created a family unit. It doesn't matter how you want to break it up or even why it needs to break up. It's going to have impact on everyone in that unit, and it's not repairable. That's the other thing. Wow. Okay, I've got clients who come to me because this happened to them in their teenage years, and they're in the 30s or the 40s, and it's still bothering them. It's causing them enough trouble that they want to talk to a therapist. So The flag I'd be raising for guys is, I understand that things can be difficult. This isn't necessarily the best answer you can come up with.
Very interesting. So, would you say that's a midlife crisis for a guy, or is that something different?
No, it does appear to fit in with some of the sort of the traditional imagery of midlife crises. It's to do with sex life, it's to do with virility, and it's to do with social activity. You know, the guys suddenly realise that they're older and things aren't the same as they were in their 20s.
Of course.
But to be fair, they're never going to be the same as they were in your 20s. Okay, that just isn't possible anymore. It was a great decade. Remember it and sort of reminisce about it, but don't think you can get back to it.
So I've said this thing because I hear of divorce happening quite often now, and I'm a bit old-fashioned. I don't believe in it. I'm like, if you're gonna be with someone, and that's gonna be your life partner, you goddamn stick it out. It don't matter. It don't matter as long as you're not. As long as nobody's abusive or cheating, like as long as there's nothing like that, if it's just like sex life and things like that, you figure out and you find a goddamn solution. Like that's just my belief of it. Other guys won't think that way, and they will be in that headspace of really like they just want to get out, and that's okay. That's okay. Like if it's that unhealthy, it's okay. But what are the things that can be done before it gets to the stage of I'm calling it quits? Is it like I don't know, couples therapy? Is it personal therapy? Is it finding a new hobby that will allow you to maybe golf? I don't know, whatever. But what can guys do to fight for that relationship a bit longer? But maybe is it working on themselves, going to the gym? I don't know. Like what is it? What was some solutions?
It's a good question, and it's tied up with lots of different areas. But what seems to be effective now is the idea that let's say it's the guy who's got the problem, the guy who wants to leave. So personal therapy, because this stuff needs to be explored. It needs to be examined.
Yeah, that
so
makes
that
sense.
it's clear what's behind it all.
Mhm.
And then in parallel, you'd have couples therapy, because there may be something else going on in the relationship that the guy hasn't clocked. You know, this is
Okay.
actually it is a thing between the two of you rather than just a problem that he's got. So
Mm.
you can actually run these as parallel activities. So you have personal therapy for you, the guy, because you're sorting out what's in your head. And then you have couples therapy, which I have to tell you is seriously heavy duty. I cannot do it. Okay.
Mm.
Can't handle it. It's the skills required are pretty special, but
Yeah.
it works. Couples therapy works because you are then put in this situation where you can have a controlled, honest conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
We've got a counsellor with us called Cara, and she does couples therapy, and yeah, like it's intense. And to be transparent and open, I've got ADHD, so I went and saw an ADHD coach who's an absolutely fantastic coach. And what we did was we decided that we'd get my partner to come to the ADHD coaches the
mm,
coaching with me.
yeah,
So it wasn't couples therapy in a sense, but it was very intense because there was things that I had put in place in my head that I didn't even acknowledge like were a thing. And then explaining it to my partner and her understanding it's not me being difficult, it's just the way I'm wired.
yeah,
And then also me understanding it from her perspective and going, oh, she's not being difficult. She's got a different, and then
yeah,
finding that middle ground and going, okay, we're going to go with this. It's very hard, but I promise, like anyone who's listening to this and is thinking of couples therapy, it's a fantastic resource out there. And you're right, these specialists, they ask the right questions, they
yeah.
understand how to get honest answers, and they're absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I couldn't agree with more what you said there. So sorry about that. Yeah,
No,
interrupting
that's
you.
okay. Yeah, and the idea is that two people go into therapy, and what we find is a third way. It's
Uh,
not what the
I
guy
like that.
wants. It's not what it's a third way that actually
Yeah.
gets most of the problems out of the way, and
Hmm.
that's the important bit. You can't. Therapy is not, and such couples therapy isn't about getting your partner to change everything while you change nothing.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think there's a joke about that, isn't there? As in, like it'll just be one person getting battered and the other one gets everything one. And I was watching. I felt like going back to my younger days, and I started watching My Wife and Kids. I don't know if you remember that, but it's like a comedy sketch of a family,
Right.
and the couple, the mum and the dad, they go to therapy, and they make a joke out of it, and they try to find a therapist that will side with them more. But I think that's just a better joke. It's just a comedy sketch. In real life, there's not many therapists who will side with one side. It is, you're so right. It is finding that third narrative and working with that. So yeah, absolutely fantastic doing that. Yeah, it's spot on.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got to that stage where the guys are thinking about this, and it's really worthwhile to then have talking therapy, both as an individual and a couple, to pull that together, because. And this is playing into the self-interest of guys. What I've also got is clients who are out there now, divorced and back in the social networking with dating apps, which are, as far as I can make out, are a horror story all by themselves.
Yeah.
But that world isn't the world that they came from. It isn't the world that they were in when they were youngsters. And it's hard. It's a really hard space to be in. I haven't got any clients who are happy to be in that space.
That's saying something.
Yeah. So it's
saying something.
There's a lot of really powerful reasons why, if you still have the family and it's difficult, it's worth putting the effort in, because the alternative is not nearly as rosy and as attractive as you think it looks.
There's a saying that says the grass isn't always greener on the other side. It's greener on the side you water it. And that sounds like that fits in perfectly in this story.
Yeah.
So yeah, wow. So I guess from what I've learned from when I get to that age, and I may go through that, is stick it out, figure it out, and find solutions. And at the end of all of those solutions, at the end of everything, let's say it's just not going to work. And it does happen.
Yeah.
Would you say the best solution at that stage is to sit down with the kids? Because I think there's a conversation that I've recently heard where couples break up and they kind of exclude the kids from all the hard conversations.
Yeah.
And then later on, the kids come back in and go, I wish we were just a part of it, because we were left with the unknown, and the unknown is much scarier than the known. Do you think it's an idea to sit down with the kids and go, look, this is going to happen. How can we best support you as still a family unit while through the transit? I don't know if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I can see the difficulties, but if it's teenagers, then absolutely yes. Okay, it's almost essential to have them in there, because remember, these are adults in children's bodies, or however you want to look at it, but they're processing this stuff with both worlds' views. So not involving them is going to give you greater pain later, or maybe even immediately. With younger kids, I understand the difficulty, but even so, from the clients I've seen, involving them in that discussion so that they get to hear these judgments and perceptions, and maybe they can even contribute their own sort of spin to it, it feels like it would make a big difference. There will be less people coming to see me in their 30s and 40s because of the damage that was done then. So yeah, it's worth doing.
Wow. Will, I just want to say, this has been one deep conversation. You've given me so much food for thought and slightly stressed me out, but we found solutions to a lot of these problems. And I just want to say, apologies, it's gone slightly over an hour. I know I did ask for the hour, but thank you so much, Will. I genuinely appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to have this chat with us, being me and the listeners. And yeah, just thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. It's been really good. Cheers.
Thanks, Will. Cheers.
If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Honestly, the more people we reach, the more support we can offer. And don't forget, Onward Shift isn't just a podcast. We've got a number of resources on our website, so please don't forget to check out www.onwardshift.com, where you'll find counsellors, keynote speakers, coaches, blogs, and so much more. Until next time, don't forget to keep having these important conversations.